It's Bradley Stalder. It's Dan Williamson. Stack Hunters for you on this blistering cold Michigan Thursday night. Dan, I'm sure in Minnesota it's also very cold, but it's freezing. It's been cold here.
It was balmy today. We got up into the teens. Like the wind chill was barely below zero.
This is the first Thursday that we've had school in the last 4 weeks. So, yeah, we've had snow days, we've had ice days. It's been all of it, Dan. And, snow, sleet, rain, all of it has not prevented Dan and I from getting on tonight to talk about running backs, these veteran players, some of the rookies that we want to target, whether there's bounce back candidates. All of that is what Dan and I are going to dive into. We're, yes, of course, looking back and what happened in 2024, but more so, we're more interested in whether things will happen in 2025. So, Dan, you and I are going to take a look at that right after this. All right, Dan. Veteran running backs ruled the roost in 2024. And it was all of these running backs that were gained in free agency. Josh Jacobs crushed. Saquon Barkley, obviously. We know what type of season he had. Derrick Henry, everything fell right for him. These running backs were on the wrong side of the age apex, but they signed with a new team where you have to learn the schemes, you have to learn the block, all of that, and they thrived because surrounding these players there was some narrative, Dan, that is Saquon how is he going to work with all of these other pass catchers, and Jalen Hurts is going to vulture him at the goal line. The narratives existed, Dan. Is the takeaway to just not believe any of those narratives, or is this an outlier scenario of supreme talent finally rising to the top on better teams?
I think the cream really rises, and that was the case with all those players. Especially Saquon and Henry. And I missed the Saquon party for the most part. I was one of those who just said, Jalen Hurts does not throw to the running backs often enough. We got the tush push. I just had a hard time seeing how he was going to pay off his, early to mid second round value. And boy, was I wrong about that. So, on that. So make sure whatever I say, probably do the opposite this year. But I wasn't on Derrick Henry though. I did catch that one. That was one that was a little bit easier for me to see. I just felt like he was going to fit in a lot better. We don't see Lamar Jackson really running in as many touchdowns anymore. That just was kind of like a hand in glove type fit for me.
Beautiful. The Derrick Henry one, this was the easy layup. You called it, I called it, Billy Muzio called it. Everyone was in on Derrick Henry, at least who I regard as sharps. Only the softies faded Derrick Henry. This was the move. He was my projected running back 4 going into the season, and I agree with you. It was pretty easy to fade. There was pathways to fade Saquon Barkley. I had him as my running back 10 in the projections for 2024, and obviously that was a mistake. But Christian McCaffrey goes down, and Devon Etienne trickles down a little bit in the rankings. Breece Hall moves down. Travis Etienne busts, massive busts. We'll talk more about Etienne and Bigsby in a little bit, but Josh Jacobs was surprisingly, a player that also produced. He was my running back 15. That seemed to be about where he was going last year. There wasn't a ton of hype, but there was a dichotomy of what's going to actually happen with the Packers now that they have Josh Jacobs. Were they going to give Jacobs the full load, or were they going to split the carries with Jacobs and Marshawn Lloyd? They drafted Marshawn Lloyd. Is that a buy low player, in year 2?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. I mean, Jacobs kind of fell into the perfect situation where Lloyd just was injury after injury. They're looking at Emmanuel Wilson, who's, all right, change pace, but, he's not coming after Jacobs' job in any way, shape, or form. So, everything ran pure for Jacobs. They really started running the offense even more through the running game than I thought they would. I thought that they were going to, hey, it's Jordan Love. They've got a bunch of good receivers, maybe no great receivers, but a bunch of really good receivers. And, so they can just throw the ball to whoever's open. I've kind of foresaw Love sitting back and just kind of, dissecting defenses a little bit. And it really wasn't what happened. I mean, they just really leaned into that run game a lot more than I expected them to. So good on them. And I think that it sets up an interesting situation for Jacobs this year for sure.
It does. And I wonder also, you mentioned that you'd hope that Jordan Love would just sit back and deliver the ball. But he also struggled with injuries this year. It was clear that he was putting pressure on himself, trying to gut it out from time to time. And he wasn't able to deliver the ball with as much confidence as we saw in 2023. Definitely a step back overall from a performance standpoint. And leaning on Jacobs, you see that happening. Do you think Jacobs is able to hold on to the big role that he had in 2025?
I think short of injury, yeah, they're probably going to ride him. I don't see why they wouldn't. Marshawn Lloyd, I think they would like to bring along. They would like to get him at least into the Emmanuel Wilson role a little bit and, see what they've got. They did spend, he was a third round pick?
Yeah.
So I do think they want to get something out of that. But, I really do see Jacobs being the guy around the goal line, the guy they count on in short yardage to move the chains. He's certainly a good enough receiver that, I don't think Marshawn Lloyd, even if everything runs really pure for him, is going to usurp Jacobs there.
Dan, we're in the hard way draft. And it's a high stakes entry. The first player off the board was Saquon Barkley, the 101. There's no reason to move off of Saquon as the 101 in 2025. Everything's going to stay the same, right? If anything, they might ban the tush push, and that's good for Saquon. So, Saquon, the easy 101 click this year. Yeah?
I think you can make an argument for Jahmyr Chase, but as far as running backs go, yeah, Saquon is kind of the easy 101. The 101 running back though has a rough history, shall we say? Anytime there's a running back up there, it's a pretty good chance he's not going to finish where he was taken. So, I'm not saying that that's going to happen to Saquon, but that's been the history, and it just kind of goes with the position. At 101, there's nowhere to go but down. So pretty much anything that happens in a negative way is going to be perceived as, oh, well, he didn't live up to expectations or whatever. Everybody's looking for that Christian McCaffrey season or that LaDainian Tomlinson season, or pick your favorite 101 from years past.
Yeah, and it was still Barkley, as the top overall best ball value rated player, but it was very close, Dan. I think fantasy gamers should put a little respect on Jahmyr Gibbs' name. He was 4/10ths of a point per game behind Saquon Barkley in terms of best ball value rating. If anything, we saw a higher RB1 rate for Saquon, but a higher flex, higher floor for Jahmyr Gibbs. Barkley, the 101, but Jahmyr Gibbs, 102, or 102 for the running backs. I think it's pretty clear that he's going to be the guy in Detroit for 2025.
Yeah, I think Gibbs, or you can throw Bijan Robinson in there. I don't hate that one either, and I'll probably just be managing my draft so I have a good amount of both of those guys. But Gibbs, yeah, he's on a great offense. But we've got a few more things to worry about in Detroit than what we had last year. And that's not to say that they can't just step right back into what they were doing before. But Bijan is, to me, in a little bit of a safer environment. I still regard Gibbs as being very safe, all that. But, Bijan is, I think he's right there with him.
I love it. Love the call on Bijan. We're going to flip the page to top free agent running backs this year, Dan. J.K. Dobbins, Aaron Jones, Javonte Williams, Najee Harris are at the top of that list. Nick Chubb, Rico Dowdle also there. But once you get past Rico Dowdle, there's not much else in terms of a pulse for free agency as of right now. Maybe you see some cuts. Maybe you see some late cuts from the rosters. But for right now, it looks like a big four. And they're not very big, especially compared to last year.
It looks like a pretty small four to me.
Maybe a small four. Not quite a fab four. No. But, I think that's actually more of an indication for us from a fantasy perspective. We should be targeting not free agent running backs this year, but perhaps the rookie running backs. Like there seems to be a pretty solid class this year of rookie running backs. We'll get more information next week at the Combine. But if you were picking from the four, J.K. Dobbins, Aaron Jones, Javonte Williams, Najee Harris, is there a player that you think is going to hit the hardest in 2025?
Of course, it's all going to depend on landing spot, but being landing spot agnostic, for me, it's Dobbins and Aaron Jones, and I'm just not really interested in much of the rest of the class. Dobbins, I think, has shown that he can, he can do what we need him to do. He can, he can catch the passes. He can run. He's decent at the goal line. He managed to stay less injured this past year than most years, but definitely not entirely. Aaron Jones, in the right environment, it didn't look like he'd really lost much. He did a little more fumbling last year, and that was, about the main problem that he was having. But otherwise, he's still a really, really solid receiver. He's a good runner. He's somebody that even despite his age, you still got to trust, especially when you look at the rest of this list. My preference would be to not trust Aaron Jones as much as I'm going to trust him out of all the free agents, but the rest of the list kind of says, this is about as good as it gets.
I also agree with you, J.K. Dobbins over Aaron Jones, but those are like the top two, and then the rest of it kind of falls off. Najee Harris was outside the top 80 in best ball value rating last year. Javonte Williams was outside the top 120. Like Rico Dowdle might be interesting if he gets a nice landing spot. He was turned up in the second half of the season last year for Dallas. He finished top 75. 12.5% of his weeks were RB2 weeks. He finished as a flex about 40% of the time. And that was with the slow start of like, what are the Dallas Cowboys doing on offense, right? We do expect that the Cowboys address running back with more effort than 2024. Everyone was expecting it's going to be like Jonathan Brooks drafted to Dallas, right? Anyone going to Dallas. But that didn't happen in the draft. Like literally nothing. And then you get Rico Dowdle, who finally takes over in the second half when the coaches were like, well, Zeke has nothing left.
Right. Yeah. And that's, I think Dowdle's best landing place probably is right back in Dallas. Because I know everybody and their brother, their mother, their sister, their girlfriend, their dog, their cat, their pet gerbil, everyone is mocking Ashton Genty to Dallas, and it just kind of seems like anytime that we get so dialed in on this player is going to this team, it just doesn't happen. So I'm not sure what's going to happen in Dallas. They also have offensive line problems. Zach Martin just retired today. Their offensive line has definitely taken some steps down from the glory years when Zeke was here, and that also has an effect. And that, I think, is probably, I think if Dallas is smart, especially in a really deep running back class like this, using the 12th pick on Genty, I think, is kind of a luxury. I think it's more of a, hey, let's go out and get some guys on the offensive or defensive line, and then we can still come back and get a pretty good running back round 2, round 3, maybe even round 4. They don't have to have the Cadillac, I don't think, if they get the other pieces right.
Absolutely. Rico Dowdle stuck on an offense that is going to lose its identity, even if he resigns. Like Dak Prescott was out for a significant amount of time last year due to his injury. CeeDee Lamb lost a little bit of time with his injury. And now you've got Schottenheimer, who projects to be more run heavy. Like, that seems to be the narrative surrounding Dallas. Now, everyone wants to be run heavy until you have to pass and you get behind. And like, Dak has shown in the past that he can be a fantasy relevant quarterback. He's going as quarterback 16 right now. I think it's a good value for what he's shown in the past. But if you're only looking at the past, not looking currently at how the Dallas Cowboys are, I may have concerns of pace of play. I may have concerns of who's the wide receiver 2 on Dallas. Like, I don't know if Jalen Tolbert really did much to prove that he could take over a wide receiver 2 spot. So there's a lot of needs for Dallas. You mentioned offensive line, like tight end maybe needs some help too, all over the place. So I agree with you. Running back shouldn't be a priority, but Jerry's all about trying to sell these jerseys, Dan, which is why I was disappointed that Deion Sanders is not the coach, because he would sold a lot of jerseys.
Yeah, I just don't think that Jerry Jones and Deion Sanders would be the greatest mix. Something tells me there would be friction developing there. We'll put it that way. But yeah, as far as Dak goes, I mean, we had these concerns with, pretty much you can tick right down the list you just gave, and we had those same concerns with Justin Herbert last year. So, Dak is not somebody I'm going to let fall too far down the draft boards, because I do think that, when he needs to throw, he can do a very good job of it. He's not really a runner anymore, but he's still got that escapability, and he's still got CeeDee Lamb. He's got his security blanket, Jake Ferguson, and he can do a lot just with those 2 weapons. And if they can bring in anybody else, I think it could be a low-key fun offense.
Yeah, Dak in 2023 was the 37th most valuable player in best ball value rating. Like, he was very, very good for you for fantasy. But last year, just disaster zone. Like, he was at an 8.25 in 2023 and a 2.07. So it was like 25% worse than that. Like, virtually a 0. Like, he did nothing for you for fantasy. So yeah, the free agent running back class is not very exciting. But to put a bow on the free agent running backs from last year, which of Jacobs, Henry, Saquon do you think is most likely going to disappoint in 2025?
Again, just because of the whole 101 thing, and the enormous usage last year, and the Super Bowl hangover, Saquon probably worries me the most. Henry is one of those things where, you keep saying this guy's got to fall off the age cliff eventually, right? And I kind of see that, but on the other hand, you watch him run, and he is the one delivering the punishment, not taking the punishment, and I think that leads to a little bit of a different career arc. And early in his career, he was very lightly used too, so he does not have the same sort of mileage at his age that many running backs have. So. I feel okay about Henry. I feel okay about Jacobs. Saquon makes me a little bit nervous, but it would also make me very nervous to not have any Saquon. There's no way I'm going to be doing any sort of a full fade or anything on him. I'm going to have some shares.
Yeah, I wonder if the Marshawn Lloyd can get some bounce back. They really did want to get him involved, but he just kept getting hurt and hurt and hurt. And we'll talk more about the Tank Bigsby corollary in a little bit, but there's pathways for these third round running backs to, it's been a year. They learn the system. They get all these, they learn how to train. Like that's part of it too, is like there's college speed and then there's NFL speed. And you're acclimating your body to that speed, I think is, popping up a little bit more in the running back position into year 2. So something to watch. I think Jacobs, and that's not because of the Packers bias in me, Dan. It's it's that I believe that there is this trend of these day 2 running backs who didn't hit in year 1, where there's still sponsorship, there's still like value. Teams aren't willing to just give up on them unless you're Kyle Shanahan and Trey Sermon.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I think the Bigsby corollary is possibly apt for Marshawn Lloyd. I mean, Bigsby was somebody that I was huge into in 2023. I did take some last year, but not probably not as much as I wished I had. And last year I was huge into Marshawn Lloyd, and so this year I'm going to definitely make sure I've got some Marshawn Lloyd. I don't want to get left out if he ends up being the real deal.
Well, you also don't want to get left out from our Dynasty Deluxe package here, Player Profiler. Take a listen.
If you play in Dynasty, you need Dynasty Deluxe, our premium package for Dynasty Leaguers. We rank over 300 players, updated every week, all year long. And there's a win now mode and a rebuild mode with Superflex and tight end premium controls. And a Dynasty League sync where you can say, sync down all of my sleeper teams, all my FFPC teams, and then you can browse around your leagues for who has needs, and then you can use our trade finder to see what kinds of trades are happening in leagues that are similar to the one I want to do. Then you can analyze trades using our trade analyzer, which balances the lifetime value, which includes pick values out to like 2028. All of that plus the rookie guide, $25 value is included. So if you're just in one Dynasty League, Dynasty Deluxe is well worth it. And use your host's promo code, and you can bump up to All In and get $25 off.
Use promo code STACK. That's right. Promo code STACK on Stack Hunters. Dan, Bradley.
Let me say, I use that package a lot. I play a lot of Dynasty, and that package is the nuts. So especially love the trade finder. The trade analyzer, and the way that you can kind of say, hey, I'm rebuilding, or hey, I'm trying to win now, or whatever. Those things are really valuable. It's, trade calculators have their limits. You don't want to, base your entire strategy off of those, but it's nice to have just kind of a third party, saying, hey, this seems fair, this doesn't seem fair, or whatever, so it's always a good, just kind of a sounding board, I guess.
I love it. Using these tools to at least continue to calibrate yourself to the market and make sure you are not so far off that you're not getting ripped off, but also not so far off that you're not able to execute a trade and you ruin a relationship with a potential trade partner by sending insulting offers. There is like a thread needle that needs to be threaded when you're doing something like that, and these tools do help you make a more nuanced trade for your team and help it be better. Dan, before we move on, Jamie has a question for us. Do you think AJ Dillon can go somewhere anywhere to be a little relevant?
Well, I would never say never, but he's pretty close to never for me. I do not anticipate drafting any AJ Dillon until I see a landing spot. And even then, I'm just not sure that he's got what I'm looking for. You basically need him to be, like the goal line guy for a team. Because he doesn't really have a lot of juice. So I try to stick with guys that have a little bit more juice, especially late in drafts. I don't see any reason to reach for a floor player in a late in a draft. I would rather be shooting more for ceiling most of the time. So, and I'm just not seeing the ceiling there.
Yeah, not seeing the ceiling, not seeing a floor either for AJ Dillon. You know what we are seeing from AJ Dillon? His thighs. We are seeing his thighs. They're very large man thighs. All right, we'll move on. There were a few rookie running backs that were like day 2, maybe early day 3, that were drafted in like the early 100s of ADP during the 2024 season that just disappointed. They busted. Blake Corum, near the top player profiler favorite, of course, did not hit for us. He also suffered during the last game of the season a fractured forearm, which, we're monitoring his progress and recovery from that. Trey Benson had a couple games where he flashed, but he also did not do very much to move James Conner over. Conner had a very, very good season in 2024. Jalen Wright mostly rode the bench, and that was even with, Etienne dealing with his issues from time to time. Raheem Mostert being out for a significant part of the season. Heck, even Jeff Wilson ended up getting snaps throughout the year. Like, that's how bad it was, and how much Jalen Wright really didn't move the coaching staff to put him on the field. And we've mentioned Marshawn Lloyd before. So how much hope do any of these 4 players have, Dan? Is this the Tank Bigsby corollary where they did nothing their rookie year? I mean, Bigsby was arguably the worst running back historically of any running back ever in his rookie year. It was terrible. It was disaster zone, Dan. Like Tank Bigsby, it was like, yards after contact per attempt. It was like negative. Like his PFF grade was probably in the negatives. It's just bad.
Right.
Is there hope for any of these sophomore running backs?
Yeah, I think there's hope for all of them, and there's not a name here that I'm saying, yeah, I'm just not interested. Trey Benson probably. If there's somebody who's close to that, it would probably be Benson, just because they got themselves a good look at Benson and said, you know what, James Conner, let's go, let's get you on another contract. And there's two parts of that. Number one, I think they saw that Benson was not ready. He was very slow to ramp up, though it did seem like towards the end of the year he was starting to get it a little bit more. But also James Conner is just a team leader on that team. And, the coaching staff raves about him, the intangibles and everything else, what he brings to the offense. Kyler Murray loves him. It's so, and Conner is, he's aging very gracefully so far. One thing you can count on is Conner's probably going to be hurt 2, 3, 4, or 5 games, something like that. But, so I think Benson is going to get a chance to crack in there. But, Conner is, he's not really fallen off to the point where you say, oh, well, Benson's going to come take over unless he gets hurt. Corum is kind of, I don't know. Corum is like Kyron Williams 2.0. And so, I don't see Corum really overtaking Kyron. But again, Kyron was totally healthy last year, and I don't know that we can definitely count on that. Jalen Wright, didn't look the greatest last year either, but they still kept giving him chances and more chances towards the end of the season. He was getting opportunities, and it was just more Miami was not running the ball very well, very effectively at all. Etienne wasn't, Wright wasn't, even Mostert wasn't running as well as he usually does. So, to me, it said more about the Miami offense than it did say anything specifically about Jalen Wright.
Jamie also threw in the chat, Roschon Johnson. He's also in that early day 3, didn't do a ton. But of all of these running backs, Roschon finished as with a .62 best ball value rating, which is better than any of the other guys.
Well, he was in year 2 last year, so
That's true. Actually, you're right.
yeah.
You're right.
So that may have something to do with it, but yeah, I think and again, when you're basically one injury away from being the guy, which
Yeah.
a lot of these guys are, you've got to take them in best ball because not every year is going to be like last year where barely any running backs get hurt. Just because it didn't work last year doesn't mean that this year is going to follow exactly behind it.
Yeah, and that's really, one of the big trends that we saw was that these running backs didn't start breaking down until like week 14, week 15, like the very late window where some of them weren't available for the fantasy playoffs, but you got there and you could then stream running backs. You could afford to fill in the gaps because it was really the wide receivers who busted mostly last year in the first couple rounds. Puka was hurt, and some games he had to leave early. Marvin Harrison busted. You saw like these 1-2 turn guys just not work out very well. So this has got to be the year, right? The running backs gotta fail this year. Maybe.
We'll see.
We will see. There's some major running back opportunities available, though, Dan. Especially if free agents, assuming the free agents are not going to re-sign, because we talked about J.K. Dobbins, possibly re-signing with the Chargers, but maybe he signs in Chicago. Maybe he signs somewhere else. I've listed a few landing spots. Are there any of these that stick out between the Chargers, the Broncos, the Raiders, your Minnesota Vikings, the Cleveland Browns? I think are a sneaky running back needy team. Dallas, of course, we know Rico Dowdle could re-sign, but that's not a given. Any others stick out to you, or any from this list that you're like, if someone signs here or is drafted here, like I'm going out of my way above and beyond to put extra capital behind this running back?
Yeah, I think it's well known that Harbaugh wants to run plenty in Los Angeles. I think we saw last year, you can lean a little too hard into that narrative, but it's still a really good place for a running back to go. If they get somebody that can really be more of a 1A type runner, I don't really believe in bell cows just happening too much anymore. I mean, it's such a rare thing that trying to expect it anywhere is really going a step too far. I mean, it's quite optimistic. So, I'm looking for guys who can be a 1A in the right situation. The Chargers definitely are one of those. Las Vegas, we know that Pete Carroll's going to want to play defense and pound the rock as well. So I think that's a sneaky good spot. If they if they can have that offensive line performing well and get a good running back in there, I think they'd be great. Minnesota, what I'm really looking for there is I want the guy who is a good pass protector and a good receiver out of the backfield, which right now that's Aaron Jones. He may still end up re-signing there, so it might be right back to the well on him. But that I think will be a very, very valuable role, especially if they're breaking in a new quarterback, which I expect will be the case. And yeah, Cleveland I think is the really sneaky one because Nick Chubb he did not look good coming off the knee injury last year. Then he broke his foot towards the end of the year. I love Chubb, but this may be it for him. I mean, the injuries are starting to pile up a little bit. So I think Cleveland would be a great place. If they get a good running back in the draft, or maybe even trade for a running back. I don't know. They've got salary cap problems too, so I don't see them making any sort of a big free agent signing. But they will be a worthwhile destination because I think that Kevin Stefanski is pretty much done with Deshaun Watson, no matter what. So I think they're gonna have a good quarterback in there. I wouldn't be surprised if Kirk Cousins ends up there. and playing on the league minimum because he's getting all the rest of his money from Atlanta, and put a good running back next to him. And I think a year removed from the Achilles, Cousins can make that running back go.
Yeah, the backup for Chubb has been Jerome Ford over the last 2 seasons. In 2023, Ford had a decent season, like stepping in for Chubb for the majority of the year. But in 2024, it seems like he took a major step back from an effectiveness perspective. It drops from a 5.73 best ball value rating to a 3.46, despite getting a lot of the workload. And we know Chubb was able to come back in the middle of the year, but as you said, he didn't look good, and then he got hurt again. So, unfortunately,
Which do you see as being Bradley? Which do you see as being the best situation for a running back to step into?
For fantasy, I think the best is Denver. We know what Sean Payton is willing to do in terms of pass catching. We know the volume that Javonte Williams got last year from a pass catching perspective, but he has no juice. He's got no zing. He's got no zap. He's got no lightning, no quick step. He lost that from his knee injury. And look, you're looking at who else is going to be there. Like maybe Audric Estime is able to be like the Mark Ingram type. I don't think he's as talented, but I'm also biased. Maybe it's the Notre Dame bias will get Audric Estime the touches he needs. But I think there is an Alvin Kamara role, PPR value in Denver that is just widely available. And if there is a day 2 running back that with pass catching chops that goes to Denver, that's a player that can be an RB2 pretty easily and pay off whatever ADP, because I don't think there's very many rookies that would lose value by going on to Denver.
Yeah, my concern on that would be that once they land in Denver, they get pushed way up, because a lot of people do love the Denver narrative and the Sean Payton narrative. But I think it's definitely got to be, the right sort of player to fill that role. Right. Because we saw last year when they don't really have anybody that fits what they're looking for, Payton is just going to really start, mixing and matching, and it's going to be really, really hard to figure out who to play on any given week. So what I'm hoping for from Denver is that when the running back room shakes out, there's some clarity there.
Oh, there we go. Blake Watson. Yes, give Blake Watson a chance. Please. Please, please, please. Please. I am so pro Blake Watson. This is, look, it's either Watson or it's Audric Estime. Please, any of those guys, if they can take the next step, that would be great. We saw 2 early running backs, like drafted early in 2024, get usurped by their backups, right? Travis Etienne was taken over by Tank Bigsby, and Bucky Irving overtook Rachaad White. So if you have to pick between these 2 fallen away running backs in 2025, Dan, is it Rachaad White, who's in the RB 40s right now, about RB 44, or Travis Etienne, who's in the late 30s? Who would you say has the better chance to bounce back?
I mean, I'm going to take Etienne. I just feel like he's probably a better fit for the Liam Cohen offense. White, I think it's going to be kind of business as it was in Tampa with Bucky Irving, having really proven, that he's maybe even more than a 1A. He's maybe just the 1 in Tampa, and Rachaad White is the 2, unless there's an Irving injury. So I think Etienne was playing hurt for most of last year, and I think that Tank Bigsby, while he looked a whole lot better than he did in 2023, I'm still not sure that Bigsby has what it takes to be a feature back. And so, I would rather place my bets with Etienne there. Don't necessarily love either of them. I mean, for the most part, I'm probably going to a different position at that point of the draft. But if I need a running back there, probably Etienne.
Yeah, Etienne, the draft capital is there. Like those types of players just don't go away. It's the
They
Najee
picked
Harris
up the 5th-year option on him too, which I forgot to mention.
It's the Najee Harris like corollary. Like the first round draft capital players just don't go away. They will stick around even if it's in a lesser role, even if it is, but they're not going to like fade to zero. Whereas Rachaad White, 3rd round draft capital, there wasn't a lot of investment. I mean, yes, 3rd round, but this wasn't the regime that took him. This was many, many years ago. Rachaad White, more of the veteran. And so we're going to base it on the profile of the player. And Trevor Lawrence will be back. They've got a new head coach in Jacksonville. So there's a lot of more of an opportunity for maybe just the more talented guy, which is Travis Etienne, to get the opportunity back. Well, Christian McCaffrey, we know, was one of the bigger busts last year, Dan, in terms of investment in ADP. If you were drafting him the 101, 102, you only got a couple games out of him, and it was still disappointing even when you played him. But the big question is whether the backups, Jordan Mason or Isaac Arendo, which one is going to be our targets in 2025? Or are you just blindly putting on like, all right, I'm taking Garendo this time, I'm taking Mason this time? Like, how are you navigating the backup for the 49ers? Because we know whoever it is going to be very fantasy relevant.
Yeah, to me, Garendo's got the juice. He's the guy that I'm much more excited about taking. I'm going to have some Jordan Mason as well, but Mason, he's not as good of a receiver. He's not as fast. Mason is the guy who's going to get you a lot of 5, 6, 7, 8 yard gains, but getting 25, 30, 35 yard games, that's more Garendo. And I think that with another year under his belt, Garendo is probably going to be the first one out of the gates if anything happens with McCaffrey. And it's possible that they'll even work them into more of a 1A, 1B type of a role just to save the wear and tear on McCaffrey during the course of the season, because this is a team that does have legitimate playoff aspirations despite what happened last year. I think they want to make it to the playoffs with a healthy set of running backs, and the best way to do it is to spread it out just a little bit more. But we'll see if Shanahan is able to do that.
Dan, I like playing games with co-hosts. So on the playerprofiler.com/Isaac Arendo page, no cheating now, Dan. There's a feature on each of the player pages called Best Comparable Player. Who would you want to guess is Isaac Arendo's best comparable player on Player Profiler?
Oh, I'm terrible at these things, Bradley.
This is fun. This is great. The people at home can also guess. They can put it in the chat. Chat, give us the guesses without cheating. No cheating. No cheating here.
I'm interested to hear. I don't even I'm not a comp guy, so I don't really think about players in terms of who they. I never really think about players this way. I'm the guy who says this is what his skill set is. This is what his offense needs. This is So I'm trying to match things that way. So I would probably flail horribly at picking Garendo's comp.
Well, to give some context, Garendo, a 99th percentile 40-yard dash, 100th percentile speed score, 98th percentile burst score. So he's bursty, he's fast, he's big.
Oh, I think I might maybe a player by the last name of Johnson.
Good guess. But it's not Johnson. No, it's not
Okay.
David Johnson. It's Isaiah Pacheco.
Oh, interesting.
Yes.
No, I don't see that at all for Garendo. I'm sorry.
I mean, you don't
I was
see
thinking
Isaac
Chris
Arendo.
Johnson, actually.
Oh, Chris Johnson.
Yes.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Pacheco is the 99th percentile speed and burst, speed score, 40-yard dash type of guy.
Yeah, they just have such different running styles.
Well, I'll take it up with the comp people.
Yeah, I think
Dan wants to join. Hey, Matt Kelly. Dan is looking to get in on the comps. He says that you may have made a bad comp here. So
the
he
guy
wants to
who never
offer his
uses
services.
comp says that's a terrible comp. So there
Terrible. Just terrible. All right, Dan. James Cook had 18 total touchdowns in 2024. Josh Allen was the MVP. Is James Cook for real, or is he a fraud?
Oh, he's definitely a real player. I would bet almost anything and everything I own against him scoring 18 touchdowns again next year, or this year. But yeah, I think he's a very good player. He fits this offense very well. But he had awesome touchdown luck. That's not going to continue. I think he's probably more of a 9 to 10 touchdown guy. Rather than 18. I mean, the offense he's in, he's got that potential still, but Ray Davis looked awfully good as a rookie as well. I think they'd be crazy not to work him in there, and especially with Cook, demanding $15 million a year. Good luck with that, sir. But
you think he gets $15 million a year? I almost coughed. Like I saw the report and I'm like, I don't believe it. There's no way. And then Dalvin's like up vote retweet, like Dalvin's like, go get your money.
Well, yeah, and I mean, shoot for the stars, you might hit the moon, is I guess how it goes. But
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. James Cook, great player. I don't think he's a horribly great value right now in best ball drafts. I don't know how you feel about that, Bradley, but I think the 18 touchdowns is carrying a lot of weight there.
He's not been a player I've been drafting a lot of right now. James Cook is the RB13, end of round 3. There's not a lot of like wiggle room for him to like win. So, I mean, he could get to like what he was last year, which was a top 11 player in terms of best ball value rating overall. But that's a ceiling. Like top 12 overall player is a ceiling. And right now he's going at 33, 34. So I guess there's room for him to, but there's not enough. Like I would need a little bit more of a discount on him. And I don't think that's going to go anywhere, especially given the usage that they gave James Cook last year. I don't imagine Buffalo moves too far away from that.
Yeah, and to be totally honest, I was way out on James Cook last year. That was one of my biggest places where I differed. Nelson Sousa, who is a fantastic mind for fantasy football and everything. He was pounding the table for James Cook, and I was like, "You're crazy." I did not see Cook returning value the way that he did. Certainly I didn't see 18 touchdowns. I thought Cook was going to be more of like a 4 to 6 touchdown guy. I really thought Ray Davis was probably going to be the guy that they used as a goal line hammer. That didn't happen. So take whatever I say about James Cook with a grain of salt. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, I only projected James Cook for 3 rushing touchdowns. So that was and he still was my RB18. Like I don't remember the ADP necessarily. What was the ADP for James Cook last year? James Cook was RB13, but he was 57th overall. So I guess the running back.
He was a fantastic pick.
Yeah, it was a really great
know that
pick
because I didn't have it.
I wasn't off of him too much in terms of the projections, but being RB18 versus RB13, okay, fine. But to miss out, yeah, I think Jahmyr Gibbs was my biggest whiff for last year, but we're back in it, Dan. I took Jahmyr Gibbs in the first round of our hardway draft, so
Yep, I saw that. That's a nice pick. That was I had the pick right before you. I was looking at Justin Jefferson, Gibbs, and Brock Bowers, and you know, I went the homer route. Also, I just tend to in those situations, I'm more likely to gravitate towards the wide receiver there.
And that's fair. That's fair. I like you going with your guy there, Dan. But the Bengals may have found their guy in Chase Brown because he was trusted more and more throughout the season. The snap shares went up. Even when Khalil Herbert was traded to Cincinnati, Chase Brown still, was the guy. Do you think the fantasy managers can trust Brown in 2025, or are the Bengals going to integrate another back pretty significantly in the fall?
I mean, have to have something better than Khalil Herbert, who they clearly didn't trust. His GPA, shall we, was a John Belushi like 0.0 when it came to how much he was trusted by the Bengals. And so Chase Brown, I think, showed that he's giving the Bengals everything they need in the running and the rushing and passing game, but they've got to have somebody to take some of that load off. I mean, I don't think that Brown is going to be, like a 85% carry bell cow or anything like that. But I do think, if he settles into 65-70% of the workload there in Cincinnati, that's a very, very valuable role, and I think he's definitely going to pay off pretty easily at that.
Yeah, Chase Brown, the RB12 in rate of top 5 weeks, and he was also the RB14 in terms of rate of flex weeks. So borderline back end running back one. When we look at what the ADP right now is for Chase Brown, he's the RB12. So he's being drafted at where he went last year, which I don't think is a good bet. Like, I think the move is to fade Chase Brown. He's being drafted at where he performed last year, which was maximum snaps. He was given 80+% of snaps and almost all of the touches. Like, he's given everything.
After a certain point, though.
Right.
Because Zach Moss factored in much more heavily early on. So I don't mind. I don't mind Chase Brown at all at his ADP. He's somebody I'm actually targeting fairly aggressively.
Interesting. I differ from Dan. So y'all can
There we go.
This is the early stances of the stack hunters disagreeing on Chase Brown here. Look, I think he's a talented guy. I'm glad he broke out this year, but I think that this is the pathway for him to get higher than RB12 is there's a lot of pathways to failure. So until we get more information, I'm not going to draft much of him. We'll just real quick, Dan, I know that we've dabbled a little bit in the early best ball streets. Are there any rookies that are sticking out to you that you're like, I need the viewers, the listeners of Stack Hunters to make sure that they draft and get some exposure to X, Y, and Z player?
Here's my strategy with the rookies generally in these early best ball drafts. I'm not gonna, you're not gonna see me taking much at all of Ashton Genty because, right now it's basically everybody is assuming, to me he's being drafted a little bit like Marvin Harrison last year. And it's just there's a little bit too much overblown optimism. I'm sure he's a very good player. I have no doubt of that. But to slide in basically is the running back 5 or 6, which is where he's been going. That's tough for me because I think that's again right at his ceiling, and I just don't trust rookies to do quite that well. I typically look at this time of year. I'm looking later on in the draft. That's where I want to draft my rookies. I want to take the the Ollie Gordons, Devin Neal, Damian Martinez, RJ Harvey, players like that are going, in the mid to late rounds. There's not a lot of buzz about them right now, but probably one or two of those guys is going to be a second round pick, third round pick. They're going to slide into a spot where they're going to have a real role.
Right.
And so I prefer to go that way right now with running backs. Once we see landing spots, then I can start maybe getting more aggressive on some of the guys that are going a little bit earlier. Though I will say Travion Henderson, that he's not going at a spot that scares me off. So I'm taking a little bit of him too.
Love it. Dylan Sampson, another player to put on people's radar. Brashard Smith, very late. Woody Marks.
Yep.
Bashal Tutin.
Yes.
Tutin.
I'm glad I left that one for you, Bradley, because I've tried saying it a couple times before the podcast, and I kept, fumbling over my words, and I was like, well, that's going to be a Bradley one.
Bashal Tutin. He's I talked about him yesterday in the Man vs. Machine podcast with Ryan Reynolds every Wednesday at about 9 p.m. Ryan and I are taking a break next week, but then we'll be back to talk about wide receivers on for the combine. Dan, you do some high stakes podcasting as well. Tell us about your high stakes podcast that you host here on Player Profiler.
Yeah, so I get together. It's Fantasy Empire. We have myself, Nelson Sousa. Sorry, you caught me out. And we just talk high stakes. Matt Modica and Chris Vaccaro as well. And the four of us, we just sit around and we discuss from week to week, what's going on in the high stakes world, which players we're really getting behind for that particular week, because we're not really interested in finding out, what happened in the past. We're thinking about the future. So that's kind of where we're going with that.
Love it. Dan, we're going to bring it home. We're running up till 9:30. The big question for people as they're entering this draft season is the same question almost every year. Is zero RB a strategy you want to utilize in 2025? And are there any targets we haven't talked about that you would be like, yeah, these are my zero RB targets, blah, 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 as I'm making this strategy? Is it a good strategy? Do you believe in it? And who are some players that you want to be targeting?
Yeah, I think it's a great strategy. I'm always going to be using a variety of strategies in drafts because I don't know how the season's going to unfold. So I'll have some drafts where I'm going, wide receiver by 5 to start a draft, or I'll take 4 wide receivers and a tight end, 4 wide receivers and a quarterback. I'll also have some where I'm going more robust running back because, each of these strategies can have their place. Each of them can work even on any given year. Last year it was a great year to have a lot of running backs, but there were also a lot of zero running back teams that did really well as also. So, you don't want to limit yourself down too much, because if there is one strategy that epically fails, you don't want that to be the strategy that you have, totally
overweight. Yeah.
Yes, overweighted. So I do like mixing it up. And if I'm going to go without a running back in the first 5 rounds, when I jump in there, I'm going to take a guy like Tyrone Tracy, even David Montgomery, I think makes some sense. You can get Caleb Johnson right in there, Tony Pollard, Isaiah Pacheco, Aaron Jones. Those are some guys you can get like 6th, 7th round in FFPC anyway. They even go sometimes a little bit later in Underdog. And those are players that I think you can, kind of build your running back room around. And then you can go in and you can get some of those players we were talking about earlier. You can get, the Trey Bensons, the Blake Corums, the Jalen Wrights, sort of in the mid round, and then hit some of those rookies in the later rounds and put together a pretty decent running back room. Because again, we're not trying to, finish third or fourth or anything like that. We're trying to finish first, and that means that sometimes you're gonna put together a team that, hey, if it doesn't finish first, it might finish 12th, and that's okay because at least you took your shot. And if it didn't work out, it didn't work out.
Whew. I agree with you. There's a lot of great veterans, rookies that are in that 0 RB range. Some that will continue to monitor their situations, like in Pittsburgh right now, Najee Harris and Jalen Warren going around that spot. If they get the role to themselves, that could be pretty interesting. Dan, we're bringing it home. Any last words for the people?
No, just other than get out there and start doing some drafting. I've got a bunch of FFPC way too earlys, both the Superflex and the non-Superflex. Got quite a few going in Underdog as well. Right now, I'm mostly doing the slow drafts. Once I get through the first set of Underdogs, then I'll start whipping into some fast drafts there as well. FFPC, mostly I stick with slow drafts there. But once the fast drafts start popping off as we get a little bit closer to, the NFL draft, I'll do some of those as well. But, just the main thing is get out there and draft and, have fun with it. Because I'll tell you what, these early season contests, there's a lot of drafters who, it appears to me anyway, are taking themselves out of the running. There's a lot of times, you get into August and there's maybe 1 or 2 teams that are the rake, but right now you might have 3 or 4 or 5 teams that are the rake. So I found it to be a great time to draft.
It is a great time to draft. It is a great time to draft on Fast Draft as well. Before we go, a word from Matt Kelly about Fast Draft.
Rookie. It's all about rookie talk in fantasy football right now. So why not go use all that knowledge to do something other than a mock draft? Chris Jahmyr won $8,000 with just 2 teams last year, and each draft took 5 minutes. That's pretty good ROI. You can start doing rookie drafts for money today on Fast Draft. The Origins tournament is live. It is the place to go and monetize your knowledge of rookies and use your favorite Player Profiler host promo code for a $25 deposit match. Now let's go start drafting faster.